The theme for this episode is exploring Laozi's fourth chapter through the method of analogical reasoning. Chapter 4 of the Dao De Jing describes the Dao, the core concept of Laozi's philosophy. As the founder of Daoism, Dao is central to his teachings. Roughly 20% of the 81 chapters in the Dao De Jing discuss Dao directly, so it's something we cannot avoid. Let's take the time to truly understand it. In Chapter 1, we encountered the phrase, "The Dao that can be spoken is not the eternal Dao," introducing the idea that human understanding and naming of the Dao leads to the emergence of desires. Now, Chapter 4 presents a focused description of Dao, which we should carefully examine. The content is brief, so let's read the original text first. The Dao is filled yet never overflows, it is the source of all things. It dulls sharp edges, resolves contradictions, softens the light, and mingles with the dust. It is something that seems to exist, but I do not know whose child it is. It seems to precede the Lord. These few words describe Dao in a way that makes it elusive. Laozi uses terms like seems to be and like, which is why we need to break this passage down to understand its essence. The Dao appears to be boundless, as though it were an infinite source, the origin of all things. It tempers sharpness, removes confusion, harmonizes light, and merges with the dust. It seems to exist in an intangible, almost ethereal state. I don't know its origin, but it feels as if it existed before even the gods. The first line speaks of the Dao being empty yet functional, suggesting it is boundless, unlimited in space. It acts as the source of all things, pointing to it being the origin in time. The next four lines offer an interpretation of Dao from the human perspective. It tempers sharpness, avoids chaos, harmonizes light, and blends with everything. This passage, especially the phrase harmonizing light and blending with the dust, has become a well-known idiom, signifying one who, instead of standing apart, can integrate and live in harmony with others. What is Laozi's point here? Let's briefly compare this to Western philosophy. From ancient Greece through the Middle Ages, there were attempts to explain the origin and ultimate purpose of the universe. Early on, the gods had limitations. For instance, Zeus represented the clear sky, and Poseidon represented the sea. Each god was personified but did not represent the creative force of all existence. In the Christian tradition of the Middle Ages, God was seen as the creator of the universe, yet the primary method of describing God was through negation. This means describing what God is 星号, not 星号, rather than what God 星号 is 星号. For example, God is not a mountain, not the ocean, not a father, and not a mother. The issue with this approach is that it leaves people wondering what exactly God is. Laozi's method differs. He uses analogy and indirect descriptions, which is far more effective than pure negation. By saying the Dao seems limitless, like the source of all things, he invites us to imagine the Dao's infinite potential. Laozi says it seems to exist in a state of being that is hard to grasp present, but elusive. This is very different from the concrete existence of the sun or the moon. In the final line, Laozi suggests that the Dao existed before even the gods. Why mention before the Lord? Because Lord is a name, and names only exist after the Dao. Recall Laozi's statement in Chapter 1, the nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of all things. In ancient China, the word Lord or Shangdi represented the highest deity. But names are human constructs, so the Dao must have existed before names. Laozi's analogical approach is superior to the Western method of negation because it provides you with a path for thought. He offers four ways to think about the Dao that seems limitless, like the origin of all things, like an ethereal presence, and as something that existed before all names. So, if you had to describe the Dao clearly, you could say it is the source and return of all things. While all things change, the Dao remains constant. The middle lines give us a perspective on how humans can observe the Dao. It tempers sharpness, reduces confusion, harmonizes light, and blends with everything. The Dao is present within all things, and without it, nothing could exist. Laozi's description may not be concrete, but it's clear that the Dao is something beyond human language and understanding. Laozi's use of analogy to describe the Tao is comparable to negative descriptions found in the West and India, where certain texts describe the ultimate truth by saying what it is not. This method works because the ultimate source cannot be fully captured by language or human thought. Interestingly, Laozi uses the same words temper sharpness, reduces confusion, harmonizes light, and blends with everything in chapter 56 to describe the path to becoming a sage. This suggests that the sage is someone who has come to understand and live by the Tao. A sage embodies these same qualities, tempering their own sharpness, reducing complexity, harmonizing with the world, and blending into the flow of life. The goal is to live a calm, balanced life, acting without attachment. In this chapter, Laozi teaches us to think about the Tao using analogy, to imagine it as something that transcends space and time, is infinitely peaceful, and serves as the source and root of all existence. Though the Tao's existence is unlike anything we can observe, it is the foundation of everything. Western scholars, after studying their own philosophical traditions, can better appreciate Laozi's wisdom. They understand that the Tao represents an absolute truth, while everything in the world is merely relative. Laozi's analogical approach offers a more accessible way to comprehend this profound idea. It's no surprise that Western philosophers hold Laozi's work in high regard. His concept of the Tao represents the ultimate foundation of wisdom that they have long sought. So, what can we learn from this chapter? Laozi, as a Daoist philosopher, continuously tries to explain the Tao. He observes that the world is full of change and concludes that there must be a source and destination for everything. But this source cannot be named, so he calls it the Tao. In chapter 25, Laozi will explain this process more thoroughly. For now, we can understand that Laozi's concept of the Tao is not something to be avoided, but rather something to embrace. Through Laozi's insights, we can explore the Tao and find a sense of peace, knowing that life has a guiding force. Our goal should be to understand the Tao and live in harmony with it. Finally, here's something to reflect on. Have you ever found something so important, yet so difficult to explain, that you had to resort to metaphors to describe it? You could use negation, saying it's not this or that, or use analogy to describe it as being like something else. Think about a time when you had such an experience. How did you describe it?